This is Garis, Masculist MGTOW flyers. That is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 524, part 2, entitled Presenting the Masculist Case to an Open-Minded but Ignorant Feminist. Carrying straight on. Marriage and paternity for men really suck now. So young women are now really starting to panic because they're finding with boyfriend after boyfriend, and in brackets, and maybe this is the case for you too, close brackets, that these young men refuse to give these young women their sperm because they utterly reject facing a 1 chance in 4 of losing their kids, losing their house, half their wealth, half their stuff, and forced to pay alimony to a manslaving, fluffy ex-wife. F. Phew, this is heavy. I had no idea that the divorce courts were that bad. M. It gets worse. The fluffy feminists who control the divorce courts, who have had their feminist consciousnesses raised, still have fluffy expectations of men, seeing men as cash machines to pay for fluffy ex-wives, to be able to continue living the fluffy lifestyle as a divorced mother. So the divorcing father loses everything, causing his suicide rate to jump to about 10 times the usual male rate. But with 2/3 and rising of young men refusing to marry and have kids, this is crashing the birth rate. So masculists see the fluffy feminists who control the divorce courts as indirect genociders who are wiping out whole populations, since it is they who are the root cause of the paternity rejection of young men. F. Gosh, whew. M. Masculists want the establishment of GECs, that's GECs, Gender Equality Committees, in the parliaments that will consist half of female feminists and half of male masculists, so that the gender issues of both sexes are dealt with equally, which, as you know, is far from being the case today. The vast majority of people today equate gender politics with feminism and aren't even conscious that there is also a very strong case for masculism. Most people haven't even heard the term masculist. F. That's for sure. I've never heard about masculism until you mentioned the term just now. M. The masculist half of these GECs will push for the legislation of several major new gender laws, the most important one being the PARA, that's a paternity rejection right, that would allow a man to reject an unwanted pregnancy that could ruin his life. Women, as you know, have the MARA, maternity rejection right, aka abortion right. So women have the legislated right to reject an unwanted pregnancy, but men don't. So millions of women who really want to have a baby lie to their husbands/boyfriends that they're taking the pill, but aren't, get pregnant, then force the father to work for decades of his life, thus manslaving him to pay for a kid he never wanted in the first place. To masculists, this is a major and hated gender crime against men by women. Masculists also want legislation of the OPTAB, that's OPTAB, obligatory paternity testing at birth for all births, to block the callousness of women who lie to their husbands that the kid growing in her is his when she knows it's not. Combined with the PARA, a father can then use it and criminalise his wife/girlfriend for her paternity fraud, another major gender crime committed by women against men. These GECs will also push for the social engineering of what the masculists call the FIP society, that is, one in which both sexes, particularly girls, are socialised by parents and educated by teachers to FIP up, so that one sex does not expect to parasite off the money and labour of the other sex. With both sexes fully fipped up, the divorce courts will be much easier to radically reform. For example, custody of kids will be made joint by default. Alimony will be thrown out. The halving of wealth and stuff will be scrapped, since the divorce courts will be based on a principle of financial independence, since everyone will be FIPS, which is one of the most fundamental political goals of the Masculists, who push women very hard to FIP up, getting career competent educations so they do not manslave a man for decades, which in time, as nearly all men become infected with the masculist virus, will cause her to be left rotting on the shelf, as no man will go near a man-slaving fluffy. So she will be manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, and utterly rejected. F.
Yes, that's why I studied a STEM field, but I see with my female friends and acquaintances that I'm in the minority. Most of my female friends at the back of their minds expect that some man will take care of them. I'm enough of a feminist to know that I face a 1 chance in 2 of divorcing if I marry. So I don't want to be poor after the divorce, so indefinitely a FIP, as you say.
M. Good. I hope in a decade or two nearly all women will think the way you do, as a form of powerful moral obligation coming from men onto women. As I said earlier, masculists see fluffydom as manslavery and something to be wiped out and hated. It's a pleasant change to be able to chat with a feminist like yourself, who is a lot more open-minded to the masculist message. Usually, when masculists complain to feminists about the way women oppress men, most feminists just freak out, who lash out at what they see as just more male misogyny, just more male dumping on women. What really pisses masculists off is the lack of awareness of most feminists about how women oppress men, especially with their decades-lasting man-slavery of men, living off the money and labour of a man for decades, a war issue for masculists, and the financial crucifixion of men in the fluffy feminist-controlled divorce courts. No para, no OPTAB, no real moral pressure in the high schools on young fluffies to FIP up. So we masculists have a lot of educational work to do to teach everyone about how women oppress men, and in fact worse than vice versa. But the reality is that women have had a monopoly over gender politics for 6 decades, so are utterly brainwashed that gender oppression is a one-way street, that men are the oppressors and women are the oppressed. That message is so powerfully drummed into women that most of them suffer real cognitive dissonance when they hear a masculist presenting his masculist case that women oppress men worse, and that society needs to change fundamentally, that women need to FIP up, the divorce courts need fundamental reform, the GECs need to be established, the para needs to be legislated, so too the OPTAB, etc. That is a lot to do, which is why we masculists need to do what the feminists did in the 70s, that is, to create powerful national organisations that push hard for masculist reform and for masculist laws that liberate men from decades of manslavery. Masculists argue that it's in women's self-interest to become bi-conscious, that is, to learn masculist ideas, since then they would be much more likely to vote with men for the men-fairing of the gender laws, as I said before. Women won't have babies from quality men until the gender laws are men-faired, since the risks of being a father in today's world are so shitty that 2/3 of young men refuse to be fathers. So you personally may not ever get a baby, at least not from a masculisted quality man, whose genes you would want for your kids. Just curious, your open-mindedness to the masculist message is unusual, Most women of your educational level are real feminazis, as the masculists call them, who misinterpret masculist anger at women as just more male misogyny and dismiss it and fight against it, instead of, like you, actually listening and understanding the masculist case. So amongst your friends and acquaintances, just what percentage of them would be as open-minded to masculism as you have been, would you say? Krishna. F.
To be honest, maybe under 10%. I think most women will be profoundly threatened by the idea of having to be truly fit and to have kids. I think most women evolved to think that there will always be some man around to help pay for her to have kids, and that all she has to do to get such a man is to sex him a lot initially, get married, then expect him to pay. Your masculinist ideas, I think, will be very threatening to most women, so I expect you're going to have a tough sell. I see the logic, I sympathise, but you're going to have an uphill battle. So I think the only way women will come round to your point of view is if you force them to, by just rejecting them if they are fluffies, as you call them. I see that men have the financial power, so are in a position to force women to be fips or to not get a man. That strategy will obviously work and will probably be needed. With most men refusing paternity, that will really get women's attention. In my own life, I've come across a few men who have flatly rejected ever having kids, using an argument similar to yours, re the divorce court catastrophe for men. Well, thanks for the drink and for all your ideas. That will give me nightmares tonight. You have given me a lot to think about. Good luck with your masculist movement. You will need it.
Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Prof. Hugo de Garis at yahoo.com. Website, profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book, Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Man-Slaves to Women, an e-textbook of 520 plus masculist flyers for men's studies courses. Freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. Ciao.